verse 16, it gave us a nice little reminder that as a human being who is endowed with amazing capacities and abilities to make a difference, it needs to be used wisely. This means that nothing comes for free in the universe, and that includes our privilege to be able to think and make our lives, but also other people's lives better. And for that reason, Krishna has warned that those who are merely born and they engage in indriya rama, in other words, they are participants of sensory pleasures, they are aghayu, they are selfishly living on earth. In other words, it is a waste to do so, because you have amazing ability, and the human race is a testimony to that, and thereby it needs to be used, reminding yourself every day that what is the highest use of my time right now? Where does my attention belong to right now? What needs my attention right now? What is being neglected? What needs to be attended to? Every moment, as much as one can, what is the highest use of my time right now? What is the highest use of my time right now? What kind of a person do I want to be? Is what I'm about to do, does that reflect the person that I am proud, in a healthy way, want to be? Or does it contradict the person that I know myself that I could be? Thereby, these questions are simple questions that once in a while bring you back on track. What is the most precious use of my time right now? Where does my attention belong to right now? What needs my attendance and participation right now? Thereby, through this, in the next verse, Krishna then said that by you taking accountability through these questions, you align yourself to Ishvara's order, which has always been operating and always will be operating. And by this, you no longer become a manipulator of the world. And we say sometimes that a bhogi manipulates the world, while a yogi manipulates the mind. So there is always this sense of manipulating the environment because it's never good enough for me. So not only does that manipulation reinforce your individuality, because that manipulation is always for the sake of me. So what Krishna wants to do is help us look at a larger picture, that you are not an isolated individual, but you have a certain role to play to participate in this larger order. And that reduces the rewarded me, the benefited me, the bigger me, all of these me's, they get reduced by simply looking at the larger picture, that you are ultimately only ever giving to the field of Ishvara, because there's nothing but Ishvara here. Therefore, when Krishna says not to get attached to results, he's not saying this to give us some instruction. He's simply pointing out what is already true, what you already know. And what you already know is that when you do an action, are you really doing that action for yourself only? How could you? Because if your action has an impact on others around you, then it stands to reason to understand that it cannot just be for me. So he's making a slight shift in your thinking. He's not saying as though it doesn't matter what you get. You already do an action because you know it's going to be a reward for action. That's common sense. So he's saying you don't have to think about that, therefore. What's the point of thinking, what do I stand to gain? Otherwise, why would you have done an action in the first place unless you want to gain something? So he's saying because that is already inbuilt, that's the only reason why we do action. That's why Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says Atmanastu Kamaya Sarvam Priyam Bhavati. We only ever do everything for ourself alone. You only ever love another person because in their presence, you're able to love yourself. You only ever put a community together because you adore the unity and the peace that that community brings to your own peace of mind. Why do you hate things? Let's put it the opposite. Why do you, when we say, I hate the scorpion, what are you really saying when you say, I hate the snake, I hate the spider, or I hate this, whatever it is? What are you saying behind those words?
You're afraid of it. Well, I think some of it is not understanding it. And so there's the fear that it would hurt you or could.
So, with the scorpion, you hate the fear and the inconvenience and anxiety. Maybe that the thought, thinking that these creatures can inflict upon you.
Forget about the scorpion. What about other things more personal that you may dislike, you strongly dislike? I hate this person, right? Hate is just another word for strong dislike. That means it's unusually extreme dislike for something. That's called hate. But why do you hate something? What are you really saying if you hate something?
It creates a feeling of lack in me. It creates a feeling of that I'm not complete. So whether it is because of fear or whether because of feeling that I'm being belittled, it creates the feeling of lack.
Okay.
Which I don't.
Good. This is the thread that I was looking at.
I was going to say the same thing. So essentially, it's like you are not happy within. When you say I'm fearful or I don't like, I feel lack, essentially, you're not happy.
Okay. So what are you then really wanting when you say I hate something? What are you really saying? What I want instead?
I want happiness. I want to move away from that thing so that I can be happy.
So why do I really hate this? Because it is denying me what I really want. I'm not able to connect to myself to enjoy my peace while this is an object of my dislike. You see? So even when you dislike things in this world, I dislike this. I don't like him. I don't like her. Why? Because in the presence of him or her, they disturb my mind. But what I'm really seeking for is a non-disturbed mind so that I can appreciate my nature as one that is content and fulfilled. So what are you really saying? I hate the scorpion because I really love myself. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Even to hate something, you're hating it because what you really love is yourself. And you're not able to appreciate yourself as long as this object is creating a disturbance in your mind. As long as the person remains in this me mode, they retain these certain dislikes for things in this world, and they want to manipulate the world constantly in order to push things away so that I can love myself. So the whole journey of liking and disliking becomes nothing but an attempt to retain your sanity. But you don't have to engage and go down this road. That's why Krishna brings in karma yoga. What he says is, rather than manipulating the world, that means sustaining my likes and dislikes, instead, take approach number 2, and that is ask yourself, what is the most valuable use of my time right now in the name of a larger good, in the big picture? Something that not only accommodates me, but also addresses the well-being of others in my social circle, in my immediate circle, in my environment. So that way you are accounting your own needs, but you also are accounting the needs of the whole. And that very act right there reduces your dislike and like for particular objects, which is the very obstruction that makes one constantly want to manipulate the world and not able to enjoy one's peace just by being. Just be. What do you mean just be? What I mean just be is go through the process of understanding your likes and dislikes are not going to do you any favor until you start to recognize that, yes, you may have likes and dislikes, but they are now aligned with the larger good. So we're not saying get rid of likes and dislikes. We're saying align them to the greater order because you're not away from the greater order. The question then comes, how do I do this? Because now we're talking about the topic of duty. How does a jnani, someone that's gone through karma yoga and has gone through the trial and error, how do they go about living in the world of challenges where every duty demands a certain amount of challenge and attention from you? Verse 18, Naiva tasya krite nartaha, na krite neha kashchana, nachasya sarva bhuteshu, kashchid arthavya pashrayaha.
For that person who revels in the self, there is indeed no purpose here in this world for doing or not doing action, nor does such a person depend on any being for any object whatsoever.
How do I live in a world where there are demands from all sides? I do not avoid my own needs, but also I do what is to be done. And how do I know if I'm doing what is to be done? And we will start by asking, what defines maturity? What defines a mature response? And before you answer that, I'll give you an introduction. When Arjuna was standing at Kurukshetra, he had his own personal likes and dislikes. He said, I don't want to fight because this is uncomfortable. What I want is not to fight. So he was looking at the whole situation from a vantage point of his own personal ideas. We call this Jiva Srishti. Jiva Srishti, that means he created a world in his mind or her mind, and he put certain people in that world, and he has an idea how we should come together, how we should get along together. This is how we are. We have this idea, you know, before we go to a date, you have this big image how the other person is going to be, everything's going to be wonderful. When you go there, it's not anywhere near that. It's probably opposite or different, or in some way it's, so this is normal. We tend to create images in our minds. So Arjuna created an image of the ideal situation that one last moment when he comes to the center, some magic is going to happen and they will see him, you know, his dear care for the Kauravas, and they will change their minds and they will come together maybe and hug. So this is how we go about it. But this is not what happened. What Krishna said instead is that, Arjuna, you're looking at this from your own standpoint, of your own likes and dislikes. I get it. You have a certain idea what should happen and what shouldn't happen. But the fact is, that idea is not the reality. The reality is there's a history of what took place for so long, and that history has come to a point of irreparable damage. And there's a certain point that you have to now take a decision. It's a call for decision, and to do what is uncomfortable. And this uncomfortable action is what we call Ishvara Srishti. So Ishvara Srishti is a duty that is being called of me, which most of the time does not feel comfortable. What feels comfortable, what feels very easy is Jiva Srishti, because it is easy. It is customized according to what you want. But what actually needs my attention, what needs my work, is not always comfortable. In fact, could you honestly, for a moment, if you were to be brutally honest to yourself, you suppose have an occupation, a job of some sort. Could you say that it's always comfortable, always easy, always effortless? I don't think, I mean, we can say that once in a while, but often more times than not, it is not comfortable or easy or simple or straightforward. There are a certain amount of pressures that are going on that, you know, that somehow you still pull through, which is an amazing thing of itself. So Ishvara Srishti, so the question is, what defines an action that is mature? What is that?
Doing what is in the greatest good rather than according to your own likes and dislikes.
Exactly. In other words, the ratio of accounting the variables of the bigger picture, including the bigger picture, of course, including your own needs also, that is what defines your maturity. And an example of this is, let's look at a real life where a daughter was, I think she was one of the 3 daughters in the family, and she was often not recognized or as well loved by her mother as the other 2 daughters. Now, when the mother got into her 80s, she needed some care. And the other 2 daughters, they were married and they were away, but not in a different country. They were in the same country. So you could say they also had the chance to take care of the mother. But somehow the mother wanted the daughter that felt she was never favored. Now, the common thing to do for the daughter is to think black or white. And that is to say, see, on one hand, my mother never treated me politely. I always felt, you know, left out. So I'm just going to, you know, totally not, you know, follow her request. The other 2 of my sisters can do that. The other way is to have complete submission. And that is, this is my duty, and I'm going to do what my mother has asked. This is how we sometimes think. It's either black or it's white. But both of those methods, would they have worked out for the daughter? Would the daughter have a good time there? Would she have a reasonably enthusiastic time choosing either of those options if she totally ignored her mother, or she totally submitted while nursing her resentment for the mother? So no matter what option she chose, it would have not worked out. She would have nursed that guilt of not having the ability to do what she needs to do. So what did she do? She chose the middle path. She said, okay, I do have a certain dislike for my mom because I can't forget it. This went on for decades. And this is the reality for me. I'm not there now to fix my relationship. It's too late, you know. I've already forgiven, but the sting doesn't leave me, and I'm okay with that. So the daughter decided, I will do my duty as a daughter because I'm called for, and the other 2 sisters are busy, but I will also be very clear how much time I will spend with my mother. And that much time, no more. So that way, I feel like I've done my part as a daughter, but I've also protected my own sanity. So that way, she chose to look for a middle path in between that addresses both sides without this dismissal or total subservience. And this example can apply to anything. When someone, suppose, asks you for money, then obviously, you know, sometimes there's this tendency to give exactly what they want, even if it's too much for you. So you have this, you know, goodness of heart. Let me give exactly what they want to show to myself that I'm a good person, or because they really need it. But then after you give the money, I don't know if you had this experience before, after you give the money, you feel resentment towards them because you felt almost forced, like you had no choice. You felt, you know, backed into a corner. If you didn't give them the money, that would have compromised your relationship with them. So what is the middle path? You say to yourself, okay, so they need money. I have the money. How much am I willing to give so that when I do give it, I will feel joyful about the fact of giving, of sharing, And it will also be reasonably enough to help them out or to keep them above the water for 1 more month. No more than that. So again, the question is, in what way can I approach the situation so that I don't completely dismiss it, nor do I completely subserve to the point where, you walk away with a certain resentment. The other topic about the duty is, how do we deal with challenges that arise in any duty that you play, in any role that you play? Duties means the roles that you play. For instance, sometimes you're trying to be the best mother possible to your children. However, your children are not exactly listening to you. Or you're trying to be the best possible, employee, but the colleagues at work are not really seeing your hard work. You feel like, you're doing so much hard work, but you're not really being seen. Or you love your spouse, but your spouse has annoying habits that are never going to go away. Or you love your parents and you want to be for them, but you also know that after 30 minutes or 20 minutes spending time with them, you already start to feel a little bit like, I want to leave. So these are all challenges that we feel with our roles that we play. So the question is, how do you approach this? By what means do you, come in there and still do what you have to do? And there are 2 basic methods. The first is, you have to recognize that, where does my responsibility in this role end? And where do their free will begin? I'll say that again. When I bring a role, a certain character, a certain face to a situation, you have to know, where does my responsibility, the role that I play, end? And where does this person's free will begin? What this does is it avoids mingling in those areas that you shouldn't mingle. Because sometimes we bring a certain persona, such as with parents, and what happens is, they were very, authoritative in their, when we were younger. And now when they get older, what happens is that we turn the script, we flip it. We're like, oh, now I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm a grown man, grown woman. Their brain is kind of reducing, they need my help. And so what happens now is, you start to infringe upon their freedom to make their own decisions. Because you think, I'm smart enough, so I need to now enforce my decision because it's the best decision to be. But it's not. In other words, one's turned care into control, because you've gone overboard to the point where you haven't noticed, where do I need to stop? I can only give my words and give my personal advice, but I need to now let them choose their own decision based on what I said. That is what it means to know, where does my responsibility end and others' free will begins. That means I've given you what I can. I've told you what I know in my limited experience. Now, dear mom and dad, son or daughter, you go and marry whoever you want. You do whatever you want, because you're still an adult and you're capable of making this decision yourself. The second factor is, even when you play your roles, your script changes. See, sometimes the parent remains a parent or the child remains a child. But then what happens is, the parent is unable to accept the new script that the child plays, because they were a caregiver for such a long time. And now the child has grown up. And what happens? The parent is unable to relinquish the script of a caregiver. So they continue being a caregiver, where the time of being a caregiver is no longer valid. It's now the time of just being a supportive parent. And if my child wants to ask me something, then I will be there for them. So this means sometimes when the parent is not comfortable, then you need to set a boundary and say, look, The script has changed. I still play the same role as you, and you play the same role with me. I'm, son, you're a daughter, or vice versa. But the script's changed. For example, with a spouse also, it's no different. The spouse starts with a certain goals in their life, and career is very important. You still play the same spouse role, but what happened? The script is now changed. Now the script is more family time is required. And sometimes what even happens is the script itself changes the roles that you play. For instance, you're playing a script of your life, that means the role that you're playing, and you hit 65. What happens now? Your script relinquishes the role that you play because the script has changed. So this means one has to be accommodative enough to understand that the script cannot remain the same, because nothing remains the same. Context changes, life changes, situations change, your understanding of nature of yourself changes, and thereby the script also changes. Now, if that script is causing someone else anguish, then you need to address that, because if you let someone else stop your own script from being written, a new script, a new chapter, then you have to assess how much is that costing you? Is that worthwhile? Is it really worthwhile to make someone else happy at the expense of stopping your script at chapter 5? I want to write chapter 6. No, don't. For my sake, don't write chapter 6. I'm not comfortable. I know you're not comfortable, but I have to write out chapter 6 because my script has changed. So your script and your roles are constantly changing, and you need to be adaptive so that you don't get stuck in these old roles. For instance, Karna, he had a very good script, and it was a virtuous script, being loyal to Duryodhana. But suppose, let's put yourself in a Karna position, okay? So suppose I'm now Karna, and you're my Duryodhana, okay? And now, you're loyal, you've shown me your loyalty, and I'm now going to play that script. I'm loyal to you for you showing me that you care about me. Now, suppose that through my time with you, I discover you're cutting some corners, and you're not the kind of person that I really want to be around, because you're showing something that is not virtuous. It's not, it's not wise at all. Does that entitle me to still continue being loyal to you?
I think it does entitle you to be loyal, but pointing out the mistake that what Duryodhana is making, the other person is, something that's not right. He needs to show him out and say that I'm not happy with it.
Okay.
But loyalty wouldn't change. I mean, how can it change suddenly overnight? If you're loyal to someone, just because somebody makes a mistake doesn't mean you become disloyal to them.
Okay. What about if they're making consistent mistakes and doing something that is highly unjust, and it's just their nature that you find out very soon that their nature is unjust, and it's infringing upon who you want to be as a person? Would you still be loyal to them?
And I feel you have to know where to draw the line. You have to know till where you have to drag your feet, and then finally where you have to dig your heels.
For me, it might depend on the definition of loyalty, but I would say no. If loyalty meant something along the lines of conviction to something or someone else's behavior that didn't align, like some others said there, it might be my integrity that points that out. But at the end of the day, where my conviction lies, or what where my attention chooses to be, that's on me.
Yeah, well, it just reminds me, boundaries is a bit of like a trending topic in recent years. And I was just reading today a little bit about one framework of looking at them as a sort of a spectrum, where you have in the middle, you have clear boundaries, and that's kind of the ideal. And on one side, you could have very rigid, and on the other hand, you could be very porous. And so I feel like maybe clear is an ideal, but there's times to have a little bit more rigidity in your boundaries. And so this could be sort of an example where, again, it kind of depends on your definition of loyalty, but maybe this is an example where you need to set, like Gautam said, you need to dig your heels in a little bit and be firmer.
I would say that Karen has valued loyalty above some other things that he potentially should have valued as much, if not more. And therefore his perspective is quite skewed because it's about the values that he holds, and loyalty was above and beyond all others.
I view slightly differently. There is something called loyalty and there is something called duty to the larger organization. Sometimes there is a conflict between loyalty to somebody, whomever you are, and a duty to the larger organization which you are part of. And sometimes they are conflicting. So whenever there is a conflict between loyalty and duty, it is the duty which should take over rather than loyalty.
Yeah, I was just going to say with boundaries too, is to be clear and consistent.
Something that's always kind of bothered me about this whole battle was it seemed like all those different soldiers and people that were supporting, all the ancestors that were supporting Duryodhana, it's like they were supporting him out of this false loyalty that was a very rigid loyalty. Like I think Nicholas was talking about rigid loyalties, and it's like, what happened to standards? I mean, it's like they knew. All those uncles and grandparents and teachers, they knew Duryodhana was a cheat and a bad person, and yet I guess because of the way their society was arranged, they somehow felt like they had to support him anyway. And it's something that has always bothered me with that war, and I've always kind of wondered about that.
Yeah. Good.
It's just kind of a comment. I don't know. Maybe you could address that somehow. Maybe, it depends on the society you live in somehow.
There's also universal ethics. There's also personal boundaries. There's also a grander big picture. What is more important over my loyalty? Is my loyalty to a person to keep supporting their ways of misconduct? Or can I, say, I'm only loyal to the person to who I am originally loyal to the person who I thought you were. That is a person who supports the society, who brings well-being to others. But very soon I found out that is not really you. And this I cannot go for because it contradicts the person that I thought you were, but also contradicts my own character.
What about all those teachers and all those people that, supported Duryodhana, even though they knew he was a bad guy?
Well,
I mean,
yeah, see, but it's also like with presidents, there's always sycophants. There's always those who don't really see you as a bad guy. This is a normal way of being, so they don't see you as such. So there's also that.
No, I was just saying that it goes back in some ways to your point that the self is the most important. So I would like to argue that Karan's loyalty actually was coming from this deep sort of self-importance, in the sense that he always felt slighted by the Pandavas, and Duryodhana was the one who actually supported him in that point in time. So because his self was so hurt, that importance of self actually made his loyalty accentuate, and he stopped seeing reason, basically.
So it trumped, I would even argue it trumped ethics. It trumped basic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So it is coming from this deep sense of self, like self is important. I was slighted. And so this person helped me when I was slighted.
Yeah.
So then the loyalty to him trumps dharma, right?
Yeah.
Which is,
Okay, good. Gautam?
Yeah, Andre, it has been a whole conflict of loyalty versus, your dharma has been brought out both in Ramayana and Mahabharata very well. In Ramayana, it was one brother who was Kumbhakaran who stuck to his loyalty, and another brother Vibhishan who walked out of Ravana's, brotherhood and loyalty and joined dharma. So that has been shown very beautifully in Ramayana and in Mahabharata also. When Karan asked before he was killed, why am I meeting this end this way? Lord Krishna tells him, because you had the wrong sense of loyalty. Dharma should have been the one that you should have chosen.
And he also discovered that when Arjuna shot him, he had this final flashback, Karna, and he saw his misdeeds, his misplaced loyalty in a man that wasn't really for the best interest of his life. So he saw clearly his mistakes, and that was the Lord's one last chance to give you one last self-reflection before you leave this body. So it's never too late. even your last breath, that is your last moment of self-reflection, and that has a huge impact what happens to the traveling jiva afterwards. So that's the compassion of Lord Krishna.
Just touching on a little bit of your note, Andre, it's on the larger scale. Currently, not even looking at Mahabharata, currently, all the war that's happening, there are soldiers and, big armies going and fighting for their country. Is it out of duty or out of loyalty? Even though personally they might not like what they're doing, even the duty or the loyalty.
Yeah.
They might not like killing women or children or whatever, but they do it out of the, loyalty to the country or duty of who they are.
Yeah.
So that's very, really debatable, because loyalty comes from years of knowing something. Loyalty doesn't build up very quickly.
I get it's a complex.
Duty comes from that moment of action that we're doing.
I think that's, well, I know, like for Israel, the Israeli Defense League, theirs is out of duty to their country. It's always been that way in all the wars in Israel.
See, it's one step further. Sometimes if you are inscripted and you have to, there's no chance of you saying no. Sometimes if you're inscripted and you do your part that you are given by your country, then there is also that boundary where you cross those boundaries, and then, sometimes we have rape, raping the woman. Like, where did this come from? This was not part of my mission. There's also the part of sticking to one's loyalty. And that in itself brings you some, punya papam, as anything does. But also, at what point am I sticking to the original duty, and how am I treating my fellow members? And, what am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? This also affects the final outcome of your who you are as a person. Yeah, so there's so many things. But a question like that, Rani, a way to answer that is, imagine you were in that place. Okay, you're suppose women also get inscripted, and you're called to the army, and you have to fight a country that has, there's conflict on both sides. What do you do? How do you think about it?
I will fight the war if my country is asking me to fight. But at the same time, like you said, I wouldn't be targeting children and women. Yeah. If it's, bomb obviously targets everyone. But there will be a lot of dharmic values on my side, how I fight. I won't be raping the victims. I won't be torturing them. So there will be things personally that you won't be doing it to an individual.
Yeah.
Or mass number of people. You won't be doing it.
So this is why there are rules in a war. Any war, there's certain rules that the both sides have to agree with. And to the capacity, how much you stay by that is also dictates how mature you are in that war and the final outcome.
Andre, I think the punya papam question for the foot soldier doesn't arise. For foot soldier, it is his duty. The punya papam question will arise for the decision maker, the ethical sense of the war, whether they're imposing a war on their army or the country. There, they are the ones who are going to get subjected to this. But for the foot soldier, even for a Kaurava foot soldier, if he dies in war, it goes correct what Lord Krishna told to Arjun, that if you die, you will reach Swarga. I think the same holds true for a foot soldier of a Kaurava army also. If he dies, he will attain Swarga.
Yeah, see, it's a little bit more subtle. I agree, but also, see, every action has a punya papam consequence. So even how you fight the war and, how you treat your fellow members, that too is going to have the final result. So it never quite, you're never free from punya papam. So the next part of duty is the word obligation. Sometimes we mix the word, and actually obligation and duty, they're both same words, but obligation tends to have a negative connotation in some areas. So suppose that, you say, I need to, it's my obligation to care for my parents or to do whatever it is that I need to do. But suppose you do that obligation, but you don't enjoy it. There's no enthusiasm and there's no relative amount of wantingness to do it. It's just obligation. I'm obligated to make you happy. Why? I don't know. I'm just obligated. is this a clean definition of obligation? If it's just like, just do it, you know, because you're being told to? Could there be a much cleaner, more refined version of obligation? What if, look at this, what if obligation remains exactly the same, but your frame of approaching it changes? Could that make a difference? So,
Yes.
for instance, before, suppose you're called for to take care of someone, then that's an obligation. You could also say that's your duty. So same word. But what if you could say, you know, how can I make this, what I'm about to do, a little bit more fun for myself, a little bit more, you know, put some divinity into it, put some enthusiasm. What would it take for you to bring enthusiasm into an obligation that you often don't find so pleasant? What would it take? And what could it take?
Well, that's the question. I think of, like, I worked at the VA hospital with, you know, veterans from Vietnam, World War II, and many of them with PTSD. It was this whole just pain that they killed women and they killed children. And in working with them was saying that was your training. You were trained to do that. And that's why you did that. But they still, like, inside in their heart, they just have this deep pain and regret and sadness about what they did. And it's hard to overcome that.
Yeah, and this is why we said initially, you have to know firmly, where does my responsibility end? That means I can't give them that support. And where do their free will, their choice to look at it or, you know, still go through that pain, that's not in your control. Otherwise, now it becomes a two-man problem. And that is something that we cannot afford. So that's why we need that certain boundary, that certain clarity. I've done my part, but it's not my job to ensure that they get fixed, because that's not most likely going to happen. Yeah. And they may even regress. That's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So again, I'd like to ask, what will it take for your duty, as comfortable or uncomfortable as it is right now? In what ways would you need to make it slightly easier for yourself, slightly more, you know, enthused about it? Suppose you have a certain department, you're transferred to a new department at work, and it's not your area of specialty. Maybe you could say, okay, so is there a different department that I could be transferred to? Maybe that's one way. Maybe if the answer is no, then I could say, with what attitude would I have to approach this new department and these people that I'm going to work with, so that I, you know, feel that it's my place to be there and I have something to contribute? What could I contribute? And at the same time, learn about myself. Maybe that's something else that could be there for you. So the point is not about what is to be done. The point is, you need to discover for yourself, how, in what ways do I make my obligation or duty slightly more, you know, brighter, right? Brighter and more cheerful. Think about that now, whatever it is.
Andre, going back to your first suggestion about obligation to look after someone, like caring for someone, I would put myself in their place. If I were the patient or I were the person who needed that care, how would you like that to be looked after? So when I place myself in their shoes, I would look after them with a lot of love and care.
Okay.
And so our, obligation will change the way we look after someone.
And what would, okay, good. So this is what I'm saying. That means what I'm hearing is you would prepare yourself first. Suppose you're going in an unfamiliar position where you've not been before. Could you perhaps prepare yourself mentally so that it's not a surprise? Suppose you're walking and you have a little magic carpet, a red carpet, and you roll this carpet in front of you. What words are written? What words of affirmation, what scriptural reminders are written on this carpet, that wherever you go, it's holding you strong and upright? What values do you stand for that you will never come off, no matter where you go, no matter what department, no matter what obligation, no matter with whom it is, you never get off your magic red carpet. The carpet that reminds you why I'm here, what I'm about, what I'm not about, what my strengths are, what I bring to the world, what light I have to, what goodness I have to introduce into the world, and what I'm not willing to stand for, and what am I willing to stand for. What is written on that carpet that you never walk off? Perhaps that's one way to walk this world of obligation and duty, feeling secure wherever you go, knowing what to do. Okay, so obligation has a certain way of being enriched, and you need to enrich it through your own actions.
The two words would be larger good.
Now, what about spillover? This is another topic. Sometimes when we play roles, there's a spillover effect. So suppose that your boss or manager gives you a hard time, and what happens sometimes is we don't address it where it needs to be addressed, and because of that, we take it. By the time we leave the job, we take it into our new role. So we then put it out on the child. Now the child doesn't have anywhere to put it, so where do they put it? They put it out on the school, so they become a bully. Or sometimes the spouse is over-controlling at home, and the other is not doing anything about it. So where do they take it out? They take it out at work. So they become over-controlling at work. So in other words, the spillover is when something happens that you're not addressing where it needs to be addressed. And by the time you leave that position, and you enter a new position with someone else, a new role, do you not take that with you? Do you not take that unresolved issue with you? Is it possible to completely suppress it? Not completely. Usually there's a spillover effect. So then how do you manage spillovers? Whenever something happens, you need to walk away with it with a certain amount of resolution, so that you at least have some good news to share in the new role. So, an example of this is when I was in business many years ago, then, you've got customers constantly, especially young males who were car enthusiasts, and they always want products fast. They want their products to work, and there's a million different car models. So you got to make sure that your software supports every single car model, which is impossible. So I used to get a lot of, unhappy customers, and I would address this. But being young, I was 22. I didn't I said, you're not going to talk with me like this. I am, you don't dare talk to me like this. So this was my customer service. Who do you think you are? Send. And then what happened? 2 days later, after I had a great time, I went to a retreat. I check all my emails. It was like 300 emails every day, and I was in charge of that. So I was like, okay, check this. And it's like, beep, 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 just full of hashtags, and then I see my PayPal account, and they're now initiated a chargeback. And this kept on happening over and over again until I learned that no matter what you do, it's just not going to work. It's going to bite you back. So I learned, okay, when someone's angry, you have to address it to the best of your ability right then and there. Otherwise, guaranteed it's going to pass on into your next role. So this is a spillover effect. There's another part of duty, and that is how to deal with conflicts. Sometimes when you play two roles, there is a conflict between them, such as, on one hand, your child wants you to attend their graduation of high school. But on the other hand, you've just been yesterday told that you need to attend a very important work meeting. So what do? There's a conflict of interest. You've prepared 7 o'clock date. I will have a dinner with you. We would definitely go out. But after you made that promise, something very important happens and you've got to attend this meeting. Otherwise, you risk your career. What do? This is called conflict of roles. Now, one way is to be rigid about it. And they say, you know what? My work is more important. Therefore, I always give precedence to my work. This is, one way to go about it, which doesn't work very often, doesn't work very good. Because if you keep on giving attention to one every single time over the other, then we give a message, not only to ourselves, but we give the message to the other that they're not important and that work for me is, above all else. So this means you need to have flexibility over what is more important right now. And there is no way to make both sides happy. In fact, if you choose high school to go to your son's graduation and not go to work, who's going to be unhappy? Yeah, work people are going to be unhappy. If you choose to go to the work and not son's graduation, who's going to be unhappy? The son or daughter is going to be unhappy. So this means no matter what you choose, you still have to follow the consequences of that action. This is just how it is. It's not possible to make both sides happy. That's called conflict of interest. And there was one example how Krishna handled it. How did Krishna handle conflict of interest? Well, there's a story of him living in Mathura, and I think it was Jarasandha who was attacking constantly, and he had a city to run. It's a big deal if you have a city and your subjects are unhappy. Now, what do? Do you let the subjects stay and get constantly concerned about the war? You don't know when the war is going to end. You don't know, your subjects are not really doing like education. They're, preparing and they have to fight the battle. Or do you leave the city completely so that you can give everyone a break? You can, have an early start. Everyone can start early and get back to their normal lives. What do? Well, Krishna chose to abandon the entire city, Mathura. And he moved himself over to Dwarka, a new city. And what did everyone call him? A coward, right? Coward, how could you do this? You're abandoning your city. This is not what a leader does. A leader stays and fights the war. Now, it's really funny because why would the Lord abandon his post? We thought the Lord stays where he needs to be. Well, it turns out that Krishna thought well through his decision. He reasoned that if I do stay, it's possible to survive, but the army is too strong, and we don't know when this war would finally weather away, and it's bringing too much stress to our subjects. So he strategically decided to abandon his post, to abandon the city and start a new one, which is really interesting because sometimes we think that by leaving a certain relationship, that is called abandonment, or that's called running away. It's not. As long as the person has well thought through their options and the pros and cons, and is it still worthwhile? And has the script gone to a point of irreparability? And what roles do I really want to continue playing this role? All of these things Krishna has taken into account and decided to do what most people would call running away. What about the example of Buddha? A lot of people don't like Buddha for one reason. Why? Because he had everything and he abandoned his wife and children. Boy, when you say this to some people, you can see on their faces, why are they responding like this? Because usually it's an indication of your own discomfort. How you would react if you got abandoned for someone following their true heart's calling. What do you think about Buddha? Was he doing the right thing? Was he impulsively abandoning his wife and children? Did he have a larger calling? Was it worthwhile? Was it a good decision? Or should have he stayed? Maybe he should have succumbed to the pressure. Maybe he should have played the status quo, the role of being a good husband who doesn't abandon wife and children. This is exactly what the subjects of Krishna's city was saying. You know, they were saying that, no, we expect you to fight. We expect you to stay in the city. We expect you to be a leader. But Krishna did something totally opposite, something that no one thought. So what does Krishna teach us? Not only do I have to do what people expect, but also what people need, but they may not even think they need it. Because you're able to think a larger picture for them. That's what a leader is. Not only do I follow what people expect, but also what do we really need in the larger picture. And that's able to make you have a certain, way of doing what most would not agree with. How could you have done this? You divorced. What's wrong with you? You don't divorce. You know, you change company. You don't do that. Well, I thought it through long enough. So it wants to show us that it's not always black or white. It's not always stay or go, but you think it through, and based on that decision, that is the final decision that you make. And then, of course, you will get your feedback, how well you did after that.
Yeah, it just makes me think that people don't always know what's right or what they need. You know, you were talking about customer service. In customer service, the customer is always right. That's fair. But, you know, for example, in Vedanta class, the student is not always right. You know, if I say something and, you know, you have more knowledge of the subject, it's your duty to teach me and support me and guide me to something more correct, right? So you can't always assume that people's assessments are accurate.
So if verse 18 speaks about duty, then verse 19 talks about how is this duty done, by what means? And the answer is karma yoga. Tasmad asaktah satatam karyam karma samachara asakto hyacharan karma param apnoti purushaha.
Therefore, always perform well the action that is to be done without attachment, because by performing action without attachment, a person attains the highest.
Krishna, at the beginning, stated that the wise people do not act. And now again, he's saying here that act with a certain non-attachment to the results. So there seems to be a contradiction. And this contradiction is resolved by recognizing there is no black or white answer. There is no best. There is only where you're at. So if the person is still at the process of trying to understand the knowledge and it's still going over their head, then there is what we call karma yoga. And that means that every action that you do, as we said, is going to a larger order, because it's always ever being offered as a yajna, as an offering. So we use an example when you are, cooking food and you're preparing the food for someone special that's coming to you. And you're thinking about them, you're anticipating their coming, their presence is on your mind, and there's a certain enjoyment about the fact that you're preparing this food for them. So you're not really doing it for yourself. You're still, of course, you're going to eat your own food, but there's a love because of your attitude about it. So by this, we said it reduces this me, the future rewarded me, the satisfied me, the me that will become something better. That's true anyway, because every action is making you become a better person anyway. So we don't have to bring this me into it. Rather, hey, who is this person that I am preparing my food for? Who is this Purusha? It is Ishvara, because there's only Ishvara here. And if I'm preparing for Ishvara here, and I'm not different from Ishvara, then why do I have to think about me? It doesn't make sense. Do actions without attachment. So what does he mean by this?
Attachment to the outcome.
Almost impossible to act without expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
So therefore, the expectations have to be for the larger good. And you have to weigh your expectations. They have to be for the larger good.
Exactly. Even though you always expect, you're not going to get exactly what you want. But it doesn't stop you from acting, because acting, that is the joy of itself. So your immersion in the action is the satisfaction. That's where your satisfaction is, in the action itself. Right now, I'm not thinking about putting this up on YouTube. I'm enjoying just having a nice conversation with you. That's called non-attachment to results. when you do your work at, wherever you do it, tomorrow or so on, you're just doing the best that you can. It's giving you joy. You're forgetting about your problems. You're learning about yourself. It's great. You're not thinking about, oh, I'm going to be bigger tomorrow. You're just not thinking about that. So simple as that. Just enjoy what you do. Find the cheer and the joy in whatever you are doing, no matter how painful it is. As I said, with customer service, I found a way to turn those testosterone angry men, into a joy. How? By turning it into a karma yoga. I said, you know what? Bring it on. Say whatever you want to say. I'm going to build, resilience to this kind of behavior. And it was the best karma yoga practice for me. By saying, oh, this is a person, they have a certain need, a certain expectation. Patience, it's not about me, it's about their own stuff, how they communicate. And that was, work itself became the greatest karma yoga. So how can work become karma yoga? Just by you choosing to make it so. Just by the attitude that you approach your work with. So karma yoga is not something that you do, on a separate, outside work or at home. It's life itself. It's just an attitude towards life. That every opportunity, every challenge is a great learning opportunity. It's a self-help course built into every experience. Dayananda has this nice metaphor called the vulturous attitude. So, what a vulture does. A vulture flies and it looks very calm, flying up, But what's the vulture really doing? Well, seemingly being very calm. Looking at prey, right? Constantly eyeing on prey, the future result. Who can I get? What's my agenda here? But you think, what a professional person. They're very well dressed. They're very calm. They're so kind of well articulated. But inside, what's going on? Like a vulture, always looking for the next prey. So karma yoga gets sort of this vulturous attitude. It makes you just fly in peace, but you're not looking for your future rewards because the flying itself is the reward. And isn't it just nice to just let go of future reward and appreciate what's going on right now? In the moment, like a child. See, as children, we were so brilliant at this, weren't we? Where the moment was the joy itself. As an adult, we kind of learn a little bit of filters, so we start to see the world through likes and dislikes. So it becomes a little bit harder to appreciate the present moment, but it's possible.
I had one or two observations. Number one, regarding karma yoga, there are two things. One is hope of success, and second is fear of failure. If you approach your work with hope of success, chances of succeeding are very high. But if you approach it with fear of failure, then chances of failure are very high. So that is one attitude which one should have to his work, that you always approach it with hope of success.
Yeah, exactly.
And my second point was, which I have learned in my life over the years, is honesty of intentions. If your intentions to your work is honest, it will definitely succeed. But if the intentions are not honest, it will sooner or later bring you a problem. So these are my personal, philosophical or practical growth, as you would say. Two things which I have learned: honesty of intentions and hope of success versus fear of failure.
Okay, make sure we all take this down. I'm taking mental notes. Success, failure, that's approach, and intention approach. Very good, Pankaj. And even if the other side is not well receptive to your intentions, at least you have cover that you came from the best intentions. Now, one last thing about karma yoga is doing your actions within the boundaries of dharma. And that dharma is in karma yoga is seen as the Lord itself. If you just see dharma as just ethics, that's not karma yoga anymore. So what makes karma yoga karma yoga? The very dharma, the very ethics, the very inclusion of the larger picture that you are participating for, that very participation in the light of what is to be done, the right thing to do, that is Ishvara. When you understand that is Ishvara, that's what makes it karma yoga. Otherwise, there are many people who are doing good things in this world, but they're not thinking about the Lord. They're just doing good things. That's not karma yoga. So not only does karma yoga help you make the right decisions because it's in the line of dharma, but constantly reminds you the very dharma that I am aligned to, that is Ishvara in itself. So how do you relate to Ishvara? By doing the right thing. It's simple as that. There's no special method out there of communicating to the Lord. You're always communicating to the Lord by aligning to what is to be done. And as we said, it's not necessarily comfortable. In fact, more often than not, what is uncomfortable is the right thing to do. What is uncomfortable is the right thing to do. What is comfortable, that needs reassessment. It could be, but it needs reassessment.
Yeah, hi, sorry. Just on your previous point about, this concept of why should I not expect, or why should I not have attachment to the outcomes, right? And we are so wired into thinking that that's how we should operate. The one thing which I realized reading through the chapter 3 is Krishna sets up the whole premise saying the world was created by the creator in a way that everybody gives. All the elements actually just give. It was not supposed to be transactional. So that's why it talks about clouds giving rain without expecting the water to come back, but it does come back, but it is not a transaction.
Yeah.
The trees give shade without expecting anything in return, but they do get what they need ultimately.
Yeah.
We have made it transactional. So the first thing to understand is we say, oh, it is very hard to do something without expectations. True, but that is a flaw in what we have brought upon ourselves from how the creator originally expected the world to be. It was supposed to be a world which was dependent on sacrifices, which meant everybody got, because if somebody sacrificed, I could be the recipient of that. But it was never supposed to be transactional. So that is the first thing to understand. This transactional aspect of working and action is self-imposed by the jivas. And so now we have to work harder to actually unlearn that, basically.
Yeah. And it's true. So as we said, that everything is already built in to give to each other. So we're just being reminded, not of something new. This is the natural order that we're being told about.
So Andre, so I was just going to say, you were asking like how we transform our duty into karma yoga. So some of our previous classes you mentioned Arpan Buddhi and Prasad Buddhi, dedicating your actions to the Lord, and as you're saying that whatever right thing you do is the Lord itself. That means you can dedicate those actions thinking about the Lord, and then whatever comes is the result which we can take as prasad.
Indeed. And it's also one more point I want to say is that as karma yoga does firstly notice, it requires you to acknowledge Ishvara, doesn't it?
Yes.
So this means an atheist cannot do this, because an atheist discussion will be that ethics themselves are not of the Lord. This is the most common argument of the ethics community. They come from Darwinian kind of evolution. They're developed through evolution. So that means an atheist has to go through their whole doubtful phase and then come to an appreciation of something larger. Yeah. Now, to finish off this discussion, verse 20. So if verse 18 spoke about duty, then verse 19 spoke about how is this duty performed with the karma yoga spirit. And in verse 20 talks about the people who have done it in this spirit of karma yoga and gained moksha. So verse 20, karmanaiva hi samsiddhim astita janakadayaha loka sangraham evapi sampashyan kartum arhasi.
Indeed, by action alone, Janaka and others gained liberation. Also, by merely seeing the desirability of protecting the people from falling into unbecoming ways, you ought to perform action.
It says here, indeed, by action alone, Janaka and others gained liberation. So Janaka is a father of Sita, king of city of Mithila, and he was a king, a ruler, and he also had his sages, who were training him. And through his extensive amount of responsibility and governance, and which is not easy at all. If you're in a king's position or a queen, you are constantly occupied with worldly matters. But amongst all of that, he still gained liberation, and so did many other kings. In this case, just Janaka, but it says they performed their duties as a king. Now, specifically, Janaka, engaging in that duty, he attained liberation. That means engaging in the duty in the spirit of karma yoga, he was able to have a mind, a knowledge-friendly mind, and some siddhim attain liberation. So what Krishna is pointing out is that it's possible to attain liberation while you are fully participating in worldly duties. He contradicts this stereotypical image that a wise person, that you have to move yourself away from everything and pursue your journey like that. It's not like that. And so even after moksha, what did Janaka do? He continued to rule his kingdom. But then why would an enlightened person continue to rule the kingdom? Because it is his prarabdha, is his talent. That is what he was always doing. It's not like now like he wants to, I have to rule the kingdom, to be somebody. This pressure is gone. No more pressure to become a big king. It's what you were doing before. It's what you continue to do now. And so there's not a big deal anymore, right? But it's much easier to run the kingdom, because your pressure of becoming someone, of being seen, of proving yourself, that is gone. Isn't it a pain to always have to be someone? Isn't that a burden after some time? Always have to hold oneself and be some person. It's just so draining after some time. So Janaka now absolutely loved his work. He's just sitting, chilling out, being himself, and in the light of his knowledge, his body and mind is continuing to run the kingdom. So now I want to ask one question. What is the relationship, going back to Gautam's question, between a unwise person and free will compared to a wise person and free will? So let me talk about unwise, that means ajnani, and free will. Based on what do your actions for an unwise person, what makes an unwise person perform actions? There are three answers. Yes, David, I saw that. So the first answer is survival. So naturally, the body-mind will have a need to feed itself, to keep itself warm and have a house. That's the first one. The second one is your personal duties. Everyone's connected to certain people and work, and you have to do your part to those people. And the third one is every action that a person does who is still getting there. Why are they doing that action? We discussed this at the beginning. For the sake of self. That means because my eye is placed in this limited instrument always has a need to feel better about itself, to be bigger. So every action, even if it's loka sangraha or loka kshema, according to the verse, what is loka sangraha? It is a welfare for your community. So even loka sangraha or loka kshema becomes a means of feeling better about oneself, removing that temporary sense of limitation that one carries, and that drives the person's actions. An unwise person will say, I have free will. But what is this I referring to when they say I have free will? It's referring to the body and mind.
Body, mind, intellect.
The body, mind. So you're right. The body, mind does have free will, but their I is mixed with that. So this is their statement. Whereas the wise person, based on what does the wise person do their actions? Because you look at a Buddha, you look at someone that's enlightened, and you ask, what is making you do these things in the world? Why are you teaching? Why are you writing books like Adi Shankara? Did Adi Shankara write books, his commentaries, Bhashyam, to be popular? Not at all. He written it why? Loka kshema, loka sangraha, according to the verse. What is this? I want to innocently share this knowledge to help others see what I've seen, what I see, the truth. They also act according to their swadharma. That means they're like Janaka. His swadharma was to rule the kingdom. Your swadharma is to run the business, to take care of the kids, whatever it is. You continue that as a wise person. You also continue to act based on survival. That's also there. But what's the only difference? Loka kshema, loka sangraha. All actions are done for the larger good. And we can demonstrate this. How do you demonstrate that the wise person's actions, their body and mind, is always done for the larger good? How do you demonstrate this?
Because firstly, the I is not now placed in his own body, mind, intellect, and he is all fulfilled in himself. He has no sense of achieving more. So therefore, there is nothing selfish remaining in his action.
What does it mean to know that you are full, as Gautam says? It means that nothing in this world can top that, because I'm already the fullness of itself. I am the embodiment of fullness. Fullness is I am fullness. So now if you are full, if you know that nothing in this world can add more onto you or subtract from you, then from what is the action? Then who's doing the action? It can't be fullness, because fullness is, it's not moving. It doesn't have any legs. It doesn't have arms to move. So then who's doing the action? The body mind is, like it always was. But there's no I who's got anything to gain or lose. Unlike for the unwise person, there's always an I who's got something to gain or lose. For the wise person, there's nothing that I'm going to gain from this. There's nothing that I'm going to lose from this. I'm already full and complete and whole. So what acts? The body continues to act. And as Vaibhav said, it is already built into creation that all creatures are only ever giving. So now you are merely an instrument, as you always were, doing Ishwara's work. So a wise person essentially becomes a total instrument for Ishwara's work to be done through them. So it's not like a person chooses to teach Vedanta. Hey, I want to teach a Vedanta, what should I do? There's no person who's kind of going deciding, what do I want to do now? Teach Vedanta. You become an instrument. It just happens. Adi Shankara didn't write books so that I benefit from this writing. He wrote books because your Ishvara Srishti, it cannot help itself but to pour out. That is the nature of creation. It just pours out. And your instrument, your body mind, becomes the mean by which this gets poured out. Janaka, it's not like he's ruling the kingdom because I want to rule the kingdom. He's ruling the kingdom, at least his body mind is, because that's what he's been doing before. So a wise person, what do they say? They say, my body mind has free will, but I don't have free will. What does this mean? I don't have free will. My body mind has free will. So when people sometimes say, I don't have free will, that's right. I do have free will. That's also right. But you have to know what order of reality are they talking about? Satyam or Mithya? And this Satyam Mithya will be explained in the next verse, where Krishna will say, for me, there is nothing to be done. So what is he talking about? Satyam, Paramartika. Yet I remain engaged in action. What is this I talking about? The body-mind Mithya. Purnamadav, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnam eva avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.